We're on.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Apologize for the delay. We were having a little technical issues. Welcome to the general fund meeting for March the 10th, 2022. And I guess the first item on the agenda is going to be any communication with the council, Dr. Kobe?
No.
Does the public, anyone from the public want to make any comments?
Oh, Kurt,
Yes.
what about call to order?
No, call to order. Yeah. I just jumped into the meeting. Okay. Okay, trying to pull up the,
It's the minutes of January 6th.
okay, next item is the minutes on January the 6th, 2022. That was a general fund meeting. Any comments on the minutes that were circulated?
Move to approve.
Second,
Okay. Vote to approve the minutes from January 6th, 2022. Vice Chairman Wong,
aye.
Dr.
Yes.
Seidenauer,
Aye.
Dr. Bonham.
Aye.
Councilmember Maynard,
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Okay. The minutes are unanimously approved. Okay. Next item on the agenda is discussion and vote on the general fund tax revenue forecast for fiscal 2022. And I know the vice chair had a question right before that she asked Dr. Kobe right before the meeting. So, Vice Chair, would you like to share the question that you had with Dr. Kobe?
Yeah, there was a really large increase in the April 2021 tax revenues. And I wanted the tax department to opine on whether or what happened. But I think that part of the explanation in looking at the April revenue, which I guess from what I see increased about 70% for that 1 month, is because in April of 2020, there was a delay in the filing date of the tax returns. And so people paid in their taxes in this fiscal year. And so the April 2021 reflected a regular payment for the month of that usually happens in April 2021. So that increase that you have for April of 2021, I don't think that next year, I don't expect that this year will have that increase in revenue. It'll be more of the same amount. Well, maybe slightly more, but I believe that's part of the explanation. Plus, we had a lot of stimulus funds coming in.
Are you talking about a level or a growth rate?
I think she's talking about both, but yeah, can you elaborate, Vice Chair?
Oh, yeah, I think it was both. But it's a significant increase if you look at the April, the month of April 2021, and you compare that with April of 2020. And you can see that we are talking a significant difference in revenue in April 2021. I don't think that you'll have the percentage rate increase in 2022, April 2022. But I think this is the adjustment we're talking about earlier.
Well, we had this discussion back in January, and we basically all agreed that April 2021 was rather unusual, and that we all agreed that that April 2022 would be hard pressed to, in terms of percentages, would be hard pressed to keep up with April 2021. And I think that that's in Seth's spreadsheet for the rest for the fiscal year. And I would like Seth to kind of go over what his presentation is, because he talks about the monthly collections.
Okay.
And he assumes that April 22, I believe, assumes April 22 would be the same as April 21.
I didn't know about any
Oh,
kind
would you guys like me to?
I
do the
didn't know about any
presentation?
kind of presentation. But are we having a presentation? Because this is coming in.
Yes, I have a presentation if you'd like me to deliver
Okay.
it.
What is the presentation on?
It's the
It was
one I sent
included.
you.
It was included in our packet of materials.
Okay.
So if you guys don't feel like that's necessary, I don't have to present it, but I did make a presentation.
Well, it speaks directly to the issue that Marilyn was talking about,
Why don't
at
we
least to
talk
me. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, and I don't know whether the other members of the council want that discussed.
Could you go over it in about 5 minutes, Seth?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And probably,
Okay.
we should also put it on the agenda, for future meetings, if you're gonna have a presentation.
So these presentations are very short. They're designed to give you an idea of where we are. And can you guys see that?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
So these are very short. There's 5 slides. It's just designed to say where we're at. So the preliminary came out yesterday, or was delivered yesterday. And as you can see, we're up 31% on the year. That is pretty indicative of it's been growing. I had been expecting it to decline a little bit, but every single month we move up by 1 or 2 percentage points, right? That's from really robust growth from the GET, which is 35%. And one thing I do, since we're talking about individual income tax, it looks like it's 6.2%, but if you actually make the adjustments, it's 23.9%. So in my experience, when you have the April numbers tend to mirror individual income growth, right? So while I put a 0% in the revenue estimator calculator, if I had to make a guess, I would be guessing wrong in I think my bias is actually to the downside with this one, because the estimated payments are high, right? And so we have really high TPI rates, right? The fiscal transfers are occurring. We have high levels of inflation. Those are all paying in. So that's what I think is going on. Again, we're all making decisions and estimates under uncertainty. So I can't make a huge claim about that. But the more I looked at the individual income tax numbers for April, I don't have a really convincing reason that it's going to go down other than last year was up.
You're talking
Right.
wrong numbers, right? Seth?
I'm talking
Yeah.
absolute numbers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And then why did you have this 281 million adjustment that juiced it up?
That's the shift,
39?
the fiscal
Yeah.
year shift.
This is the fiscal year shift. So this is for 2020. So if we take this at the 281 million out of 2020 or fiscal year 2021, we go from a percentage growth of 6.2% to 23.9%. Right. And so that's for the year. That means estimated tax payments. That means withholding. Those are the 2 biggest things.
Wasn't it the other way? I mean, didn't we have like 300 million in July of 2020? So there was a unusual bump for the fiscal year 2021.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's Uh, what
That's
Is
what
it-
that is.
So why are you adding it at this point? Because, oh, I see. Okay, okay, I follow. I got it. It makes sense to me.
Are you there, Seth?
I can't hear anything.
Seth, your audio went out. Hello.
Next slide, please.
This is G.
So there you get essentially these are year over year, not month over month, right? So these are the month of
March 21, April 21, May 21 compared to 1 year ago.
Is it the cumulative for the year? Or is it?
No, no,
it's
it's
just
just year over year, comparing the same month 1 year earlier. And so that the point of this slide is that we've been running it for GET at 25%, 26% above for the last 4 months.
But you're considering the whole year, right? Up to that month?
No, it's
No,
1 year.
That's what I mean.
months
That's what I
It's
mean.
1 month.
One, I
It's-
just mentioned
So the
month.
26% growth rate in February 2022 is comparing the number for February 2022 to February 2021. That's it, not the cumulative.
So you're just measuring month versus month.
Yes.
Year
Okay.
over year for 1 month of data. Yeah,
So you're just comparing the month, right? Because you're using the term year over day. So I'm confused by what.
well, that's the way the terminology is used. Year over year means it's compared to the previous year. It's not year to date. It's not cumulative.
Okay, so it's just month to month, like,
Okay,
Whatever.
It's the same month from the previous year.
yeah.
correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm, okay.
Next slide, please.
Too bad we can't
And
hear
this-
you, Seth.
This was kind of why I was asking if Marilyn was talking about the level or the growth rate, because it's true the level for April was much larger than normal, but the growth rates for April and May were both much larger than normal because we're comparing, and I'm talking about in 2021. You're comparing. You don't have to have a abnormally high level in order to get those massive growth rates when you're comparing to April and May of 2020. So that anyway, that's why I asked about that. And this shows the same thing, that in the most recent data, we've been averaging each month compared to the previous year, same month, we've been averaging 30 to 40% growth in total general fund, really for almost the whole fiscal year.
What happened in July? What's that delta?
Yeah, what happened in July?
That's that tax payment again.
This is
Okay.
GE.
Yeah, this is general fund. We switched the slide. So yeah, that's the shifting of the revenue. So we had a big July of 2020. No.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
July 2020 is
Yeah,
when
because
when
that
all
was-
the money was due.
Right.
Instead of being due in April of 2020, it was due in July of 2020.
Yeah, that's
It was
right.
actually,
So July 2021 looks low by growth comparison compared to July 2020.
Jack, actually what happened was half of it was due in April, half was due in July. But the reality was many people paid it in July. So
And
it
that's
was
what
actually
Seth
half of
Well,
it.
is
okay.
backing.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah,
That's what Seth is backing out in that table that he showed us.
Okay,
Next
so
slide.
next slide. Yeah.
He's back.
Yeah.
And do you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is the tables that we provided to you several years ago. And so on the left-hand side is the assumed growth rate for fiscal year 2022, right? And then this is on the right-hand side is the implied growth rate you need for the last 4 months of the year, right? So what we see is if you have 3.6% growth for the last 4 months of the year, you'll get, 20%. If you did 9.9% growth for the last 4 months of the year, this is the last 4 months of the year compared to the last fiscal year 2022 compared to fiscal year 2021, you would get 22.5%, right? So this little chart is designed to help you estimate, depending on what your priors are for the final 4 months of the year, how that would translate into total general fund growth. So with this and with the general fund calculator that I have delivered you, you guys should be able to put in what you believe you think it has, and you would come out with a general fund forecast for fiscal year 2022.
So we are on record now for 15% forecast, right?
Correct.
I mean,
so
okay.
this is
Can you
this is the
bring that back to that slide
Sure.
that you just had?
Mhm.
Okay, 15% forecast, which if we're going to end up at 15%, we're going to basically assume that we're going to have negative 9% growth in revenues for the last 4 months of the fiscal year. Or negative
Correct.
8.8. Okay. All right.
And then again, I've provided this. I'm trying to really promote this, but these are the two major variables in the model that you guys give, right? So if you guys have discussions about annual visitor growth, right now the consensus is, I believe, somewhere around 7.6. That's what the consensus is. Just looking at the numbers, I think, Carl, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're on track to break 8 million for fiscal year 2022. So these are ideas, and with that, I will.
Is it
Can
a
you-
fiscal year
can-
set or calendar year? For the,
Is-
This is for fiscal year.
but you're measuring the 8 million by fiscal year, because normally, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay, what I find interesting in this table is that the revenues are much more sensitive to the assumed visitor arrivals than they are to total personal income growth. So
Yeah, and given, like, this is a historical model, right? So probably given the sensitivity to visitor arrivals versus TPI, which is a relatively stable thing, if we didn't take into account the fiscal stimulus, that's probably a decent assumption, and that's why we have it for this particular model. Are there any
So if
questions
you-
on this one? Go ahead.
So that the answer to so Seth raised the question, are we going to break 8 million visitors for this fiscal year? That's certainly our forecast. And I don't know what the council mean forecast is, but my guess is it's a lot lower than that. That's been the norm for quite a while now, is that the council has been lagging significantly in their forecast of visitor arrivals. And if you look at total nominal personal income, that number should be something on the order of, well, so the data for Q3 non-fiscal year, right? Q3 2021 was 5% growth. And I think the nominal number for, at least in our forecast, is going to be about 3% for the whole fiscal year. And that's partly because in the second half of the fiscal year, the waning effects of stimulus start to really bite.
Do you expect that in
I had
this,
a question.
Carl, do you expect it to bite in this fiscal year?
2020 fiscal year 2022, sure.
I had a question for Carl or Jack. Lately we've had a lot of inflation, and I was thinking the tax revenues are probably increasing because of the inflation effect. And I was
that's
wondering
part of it.
what percentage do you think the increase in tax revenues collected is due to the real economic growth and due to inflation? Because we have the inflation factor, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to know
that's a good question.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why the left variable, the whole total personal income here, is in nominal terms, right? I mean, tax revenues are collected in nominal terms, and so if everything goes up 100%, and I mean, I can't tell you the exact breakdown. I don't know if Seth if that's in the model as a separate variable. That would be one way to get at it. I can't remember sort of what the elasticity of tax revenues is with respect to prices.
With regard to income, it's a bit over 1, right?
Right, for
So we're
income,
talking,
yeah.
let's say it's 1.2. Okay, for income, and
yeah,
and so assume, for the sake of discussion, assume that half of the growth is due to real economic activity and half of it is due to inflation.
The 1.2,
There's no,
1.2 you mentioned, Jack, is that for general fund elasticity or income elasticity?
yeah, well, general fund
General fund.
elasticity relative to income. Numerator is percent change in general fund, the denominator is percent change in income, nominal income. And so for every 10% increase in nominal income, revenues go up by 12%. That's what a
Actually,
1.2.
Has wage
I can
level-
actually tell you what the, this is not exactly an elasticity, but in the tax revenue, in the general fund model that I run, let's see, the parameter on the change in inflation, the quarterly change in inflation is almost 3. So if inflation goes up by 1%, that doesn't make any sense. That's too large.
You have it in logs? perchance?
It's in the change in logs.
Okay.
Yeah, the equation is pretty complicated, so I'm not going to try and translate it on the fly. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, inflation is going to drive up tax revenues.
Yes.
I mean, the general excise tax really captures it because it's capturing the inflated prices.
But,
Yeah,
but what we're talking about right now in terms of tax revenues so far this year, that we're just beginning to see the inflation. Inflation didn't really accelerate until the last 3 or 4 months, and some of that's not even in the tax revenue data yet.
I can feel that inflation effect here, looking at supplies.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So everybody has to adjust their prices because of the increased costs of supplies, staff, everything. And
Yeah,
so,
and the state general fund will be the beneficiary of part of that.
yeah, so the state general fund, without having to raise income taxes or taxes, they're going to be the beneficiary of having a higher general fund growth.
Yep.
Is that right? And the
Yeah,
more they're
until spending falls off, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when the effects of the rising prices so for example, increase in oil prices, increase in energy prices, that will drive higher tax revenue growth, but people will cut back on spending in restaurants and other areas because they've got to put that money into their tank or into their electric bill. And there's distributional effects. People who are at the lowest end of the income distribution basically are now buying things that that we're importing and skimping on things that would have direct effects on the macroeconomy. So it's not a win-win. Let's put it that way. And those effects start to bite more and more the farther out we go into the forecast, and the longer the energy prices remain elevated.
Yeah. The other thing is, even if income goes up for businesses, the costs, the expenses are also going to be rising.
Yes. And some people are talking about the R word again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a
was-
little premature, but I mean, we were talking earlier about the uncertainty, and the bottom line is that no one can tell you how long oil prices are going to be at 120 or 130 or 140 or whatever they settle at. I mean, today we saw one of the biggest drops in oil prices in several years because UAE said they were going to try and encourage OPEC to increase production. And frankly, no one knows what's going to happen to that situation. We don't know how long the war is going to last. So we're facing a lot of uncertainty, but that's for us. That's not this fiscal year. For this fiscal year, most of what's happening is already baked in.
Well, the sanctions to me are going to hit maybe in the next few months, but we have not only the fuel costs and oil and gas, but also the cost of food because of the grain that Ukraine and Russia was producing, and also the fertilizer that Russia was, I guess, was producing a lot of the fertilizer because they had the chemicals for it. And so I'm just worried about, the fuel costs going up and the cost of food going up because of the sanctions. And it seems like whatever sanctions they were are going to, it's going to be coming back to US consumers. And so they'll feel the higher cost of both.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
Right?
And
I'm gonna-
many of those cost effects will, go ahead, Seth.
I was just going to say, I'm going to stop the presentation. It sounds like you guys are going into the discussion of the general fund forecast. I would suggest that you break it down by year, because what you guys are discussing is probably going to affect fiscal year 2023 more than 2022. But I will stop. And unless you have any other additional questions.
I agree.
That was what I was trying to say, was that, and when I agree, Marilyn, that the cost effects, the rising prices, higher inflation, higher gas prices, higher electricity prices, higher food prices, those are going to be more immediate, right? So those are things that are showing up now and will continue to show up this fiscal year. But what I'm getting at is that those aren't likely to have a material impact on our primary source of demand, which is visitor spending. If you look at, so maybe they have a small negative impact, but most of the plans for the rest of this fiscal year for tourism have already been booked, right? I mean, people, and if you look at the bookings data, it's pretty surprising. All the way through the summer, we're talking about 40 to 50% growth in statewide bookings compared to last year. And you remember how strong last year was. Now, this is not, so just to foreshadow the question, this is not on Maui. Maui their bookings are basically flat compared to a year earlier because they were full a year earlier. But on Oahu and on Kauai, both who were not full last year, we're seeing big increases in bookings all the way through the end of this fiscal year. So on Oahu, we're talking right now 100 to 150, even 200% growth in bookings, and all summer 80 to 90% growth in bookings. And so basically what I'm getting at is that the impacts of Ukraine, while they will cause, if anything, because of the higher prices, and actually when I ran our model with much higher oil prices and boosted overall inflation between 50 basis points and 100 basis points for the fiscal year, it drives up tax revenues, even with very small declines in visitor arrivals for the calendar year for 2022.
Councilmember
Can I ask?
Alonso.
Yeah, Carl, can I ask a quick question? With regard to that bookings data, is it reflecting international travel as well, or is it primarily domestic that you're seeing?
So I'm pretty sure that particular source that I'm looking at is not broken down by international and domestic. I can tell you that if you look at the arrivals data, we know that particularly Canada saw a pretty sharp recovery, not as sharp as the US bounce back, but I want to say by December or January, Canadian visitors were back to about 40% of their 2019 levels. And we anticipate that we'll see the biggest jump in Japanese arrivals probably at Golden Week. Now, there's still some policy changes that have to happen in Japan. They have to actually let people fly back into the country, right? They actually have hard caps on the number of people who can fly into the country. And so presumably those restrictions will continue to be relaxed. And through summer, we'll start to see that recovery.
Thank
So don't you think, Carl, we're going to be impacted, not so much this fiscal year, but next fiscal year when the more international markets open up for tourism? That's going to cut it. rather, in other words, people will have more choices. That's going to be more competition for a while.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I mean, in our forecast, and it's really second half of 2022 is when this we think this really starts to bite. Is it's not just that people have more choices, but it's also crowding out effects. If Japanese visitors come back and we start getting Australian and New Zealand visitors and so on, you're likely to see a decline. I don't think we have U.S. visitors in the next several years as high as they were in 2021.
Mhm.
Carl, what are your absolute numbers that you have for visitors for 22, 23, and either calendar year or fiscal year?
Yeah, the fiscal year visitor arrivals is 8.2 million. 23, it's 9.2 million. And
Okay,
24, it's 9.4.
And the council average is 7.5 and 8.4 for 22 and 23, according to table 3 in our booklet.
Yeah, so we're 10% higher than the council, sounds like. I think our growth rate is about 150% for 2022.
Mhm.
Well, my numbers are the same as Carl's. So you all, the rest of you have been lowballing the visitor revenue. But so I think one thing that these models don't take into account is what has actually happened year to date, right? They just assume from July that these are the numbers. So we have a lot of information already baked in what we have through February. So really we need to, I think, concentrate on what happens in the next 4 months. And if you use GE as an example, it's, those numbers have been pretty consistently 20 whatever percent year over year. So we'll see what the impact will be. Lots of things going on, not just oil prices. No doubt that will eventually hit ticket prices. We've got the Fed on the move with a yield curve that's very, very flat. I mean, last time inflation was this high, the 10-year was at 10%, not 2%. So obviously the market
Was
is
at 10%. So they'll have a lot of rate increases this year.
well,
Oh,
no,
that's
what
on
I'm
the short
saying
end.
What I'm saying is, no, the 10-year today is 2%. And in 1982 or wherever, it was at 10%. So obviously the yield curve is assuming that this inflation is not going to stay. For all we have negative real returns all the way out to 30 years. So it's going to be a very interesting fiscal year 2023, I think, with all these things that are going to be happening.
Okay, but what about 2022?
So one correction. So the models do take into account what's happened year to date. Well, at least our models do. I guess the tax department's models, I think, are annual. And so they're not taking that into account. But Seth's spreadsheet model definitely does.
Yes,
And
yes.
I plugged in. So why don't we talk about that? We don't have a growth rate for March. I picked 30% for March. I picked 0 for April, just to be conservative. And if you just assume that tax revenues grow at the rate of inflation for May and June, so you assume no real growth, you still get 22% for the year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the numbers that I plugged in there are conservative. And I mean, you have to have pretty big. If you put in the 0 for April, that brings things down a lot, and it doesn't make that much difference what you do for the rest of the fiscal year.
Has the council ever projected 20% or more growth rate? I know we have inflation. We haven't seen this kind of inflation in the early 80s, as far as I've
It's
seen.
Oh, sure we have.
it's-
In Hawaii,
yeah,
we
it's
have.
not-
This is not the U.S. Our inflation rate is right now. It's about 100 basis points to 150 basis points below the U.S. inflation rate.
Oh, really?
And yeah, it's mostly, and believe it or not, it's mostly because rents have not gone up in Hawaii like they have on the mainland. We're at maybe 3% for rents, and the mainland's more at 4.5% to 5%.
I have
Yeah,
another
it's-
question. Carl, given the fact that we have a lot of inflation and prices have gone up, fuel and food and everything that we see, how much, I think that would affect a lot of people's disposable income as tourists, and that could somehow affect spending also. What are your thoughts on that?
So that you're right. I mean, but we would, so the way that would show up in our forecast is primarily out in 2023 with fewer visitors. Once you've made the commitment to come to Hawaii, you have a budget in mind. So you think about, I'm going to go on vacation and I'm going to spend $10,000, right? That's my budget. So the same money is going to get spent. You may buy fewer things, right? You may end up spending most of it on gasoline or higher priced food. But we think of this as sort of this two-stage budgeting process where you first decide how much you're going to spend, and then you look and decide where you're going to go. And it's not necessarily the way everybody does it. So I guess I'm not real concerned. Again, I'm not concerned about 2022. It's really about 2023 and how much the high inflation and the higher prices eat into people's day-to-day spending, and then causes them to choose not to come to Hawaii because they've already gone through their budget buying food and gas.
And I think that's a great discussion for 2023, but we're on 2022 now. And so can we just kind of close out 2022? I mean, we're kind of talking about 2023, really.
Marilyn, where are you on 2022?
You're asking
For 2022, I think it might be closer to 20%. 20%. I mean,
that's where
my
I'm at.
thoughts.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, the input mean is 21 from Model 1. So
it's 5% difference.
Do people feel comfortable with 21?
I feel comfortable with either 20 or 21.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I mean, at those kind of levels here.
Yeah, within 5%.
Yeah, I think that absent some threat of war that's spreading to here from Russia, I think,
or from Taiwan,
or Taiwan from China.
Why are we talking about Taiwan? Come on.
That is a bigger threat.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, so the world could come to an end. I mean, the worst case scenario is just that. It's the worst case scenario. And our forecast is always based on, current known events. We're not, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the thing about it is, I don't think that people really a lot of people have not been exposed to war the way it is graphically presented on television or, internet. And I think that, it's really changing people's behavior. For governments, they have to spend more on military, and all the our adversaries, are looking to see where they can, I guess, get an advantage. Because we are, by doing what we have with the oil and all that, the sanctions, in a sense, we're gonna have lower economic growth overall, I think, because of that. And so we are not in as strong a position without the oil, without the food.
We haven't heard from you, Councilmember Lee. I'll get to you, Dr. Brown.
But I'd be happy with either 20 or 21.
Councilmember Lee, do you have any comments, input?
Because I feel I'm trying to put in context that we're voting in a very constrained period, which I don't think we're going to see these effects yet. It will happen, but in this period, so I'm happy with 21. I actually think it's a little higher, but that seems to be a consensus.
Okay, So does anyone, Dr. Bonham, did you want to say anything before we put it to a vote at 21?
Oh, we don't have a motion, so I'll make a motion of 21 and I'll bet that it's higher.
I second the motion. Yeah, I second the motion.
Cool. Second the motion. Vice Chair Newell? So we're voting on for fiscal year 2020, 21%.
Okay, I vote yes.
Dr. Sideron,
Aye.
Dr. Bonham,
Yes.
Councilmember Maynard,
Yes,
Councilmember Hayashi,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
The vote carries unanimously. The council has estimated 21% growth rate for fiscal 2022. Okay, the next is to move on to the more challenging year, fiscal year 2023.
and keeping in mind, we just increased the starting point, right?
Yeah, we increased the
By
pay by 6
by
points.
6%. So
Yeah.
we're starting from approximately what we were estimating for last time.
The model,
You know, the
summary table for the model shows as 8.3% for consensus for model 1. I'm just throwing that out there as a point of reference. I'm not saying it's going to be 8.3 because my model came out less than that.
What did your
But-
model come out with, Jack?
The one that, well, I just submitted the assumptions I submitted to the council. They gave me back the model, and I think,
Okay,
I don't know where the hell it is. Somewhere on my computer.
I'm member 5.
well, I thought
Here it
I was
is.
member 5.
I came in model.
You might be. I
model-
think I might be member 4.
I came in at 5.9 for 23.
It was very close to mine, Jack.
There we go. Brilliance.
No, I'm member
Brilliant.
5. Maybe there's more than one member 5. Oh no, I'm member 2. Sorry.
We were very similar, but yeah, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure I'm 5.
Should just put our names on it from going forward.
So
I'm
one of the
trying
things that that I did actually today was rerun our models with quite a bit stronger inflation, and it didn't make a huge difference in we're basically what's happening is I think we're getting offsets in higher excise tax collections and higher so you get price effects and then you have real effects, and the real effects and the price effects are almost offsetting because they even though I'm talking about 50 to 75 basis points more inflation, we've also got actually I also built in a US recession and it really didn't change the tax forecast at all, just not that much because as I said, the higher price effects are offsetting the fewer visitors and less overall, less job growth and things like that. Instantly, I don't think there's going to be a US recession right now, but who the heck knows? Because I don't know what oil prices will be for the rest of the year, and period.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about a lot of commentators thinking that there would be a recession or even stagflation. And I wanted to know, so you don't think there was going to be a recession or stagflation?
I didn't say that. Stagflation is not a recession, right? Stagflation just means slower growth
Right.
and high inflation, and that seems very likely.
You think that's
How
like-
long it lasts is another issue, right? So I have absolutely no doubt that when we release our next forecast, the growth rate forecast will be lower, and the inflation forecast will be higher, and that will likely continue for at least a few years. I don't know who you're reading. I've seen almost nobody, other than saying, "Well, gosh, there might be a recession," right? And most of the people who are worried about recessions are more worried about the Fed than anything else.
There are people who are worried about the Fed and what they're going to do to try to rein in the inflation And that's why they're talking about the recession in the next year because of the interest rates.
We all remember Paul Volcker.
Christy, do you have any thoughts on the interest rates?
Well,
That-
well, certainly they are talking about increasing interest rates rather, well, I don't know if it's dramatically, it all depends on your drama class, but certainly they're talking about increasing interest rates anywhere from 4 to 6 times this year, which would, the risk, I think, is that to that 210 spread. When that goes negative, almost always we've got a recession that follows. So in order to bring down inflation, the Fed often raises interest rates and incites a recession. And that does seem to cure inflation, but nobody, everybody hopes for a soft landing. I think if everything's been thrown up in the air with what's going on in Russia and the Ukraine and oil prices and all of that stuff. So I don't think the Fed is going to do anything crazy. Sounds as though they're going to be rather gradual in what they do. And but as far as real estate prices and everything else, affordability, I don't think we can sustain the type of real estate price increases that we've shown in the last year. Who's going to be able to afford these houses, right? And with interest rates going up, payments are going to be going up also. So I think for Hawaii in particular, higher interest rates are a risk as far as the general economy goes, particularly with the value of real estate.
Jack, what was your,
Yeah.
I want to ask Marilyn, Jack, what was your number for fiscal 2022? Was it 5.9?
For 23, my number,
Yeah, 23, sorry.
5.9.
What do you think, Carl?
Actually, I was really interested in Christie's discussion about interest rates, and we're in a crazy, unique situation where one of the reasons that the 210 spread has narrowed as much is because of flight to quality, right? And so there's been, the 10-year bond has been all over the place, as has everything else. And first near the end of the last year, it's just rising with inflation expectations, and then bam, everybody's rushing to the dollar to hide out from equities and from just risk in general. And so it's very possible that we'll get an inversion and it won't mean what it's supposed to mean.
Right.
I think it's pretty clear that this Fed does want to be gradual, right? They really don't want to go down in history as the Fed that missed on inflation for a year and then overshot and caused a deep recession because of what is potentially normally oil shocks are short-term phenomena, right? What happens is oil prices go up sharply. It's not always a month or two. It can be 3, 6, 9 months, and then those higher prices cause demand to go away. And this is actually why UAE and OPEC will likely increase supply, because if they're not careful, oil prices will go up enough that everybody will stop driving.
That's right.
And they'll stop flying, and then all of a sudden oil prices will collapse like they did in 2009. We were at $140 something a barrel.
147 in 2008.
Yeah, and 6 months later, right, we were down in the $30, $40 range. So,
Oh yeah.
and that's not the kind of thing that the Fed should jack up interest rates to prevent that spurt of inflation. So, I don't have an answer. I agree with Christy that the interest rates are a drag. In our models, what has happened is as as we were raising the interest rate forecasts, and sharply, I mean, basically counting on, 125 basis points of increase in the Fed funds rate, and getting but we were putting the long bond and mortgage rates up more at in a historic relationship, not accounting for the flight to quality, and so that's driving down affordability and hurting home prices and hurting construction. But then that's being offset by the recovery in incomes that is higher than we anticipated, and it's sort of dampening the effects of those rising interest rates. So our forecast for the model, the numbers that I submitted for next year are higher than the mean. There was 10% growth. I'm perfectly comfortable with the mean of 8.3%. My guess is it'll be lower than that. Our last forecast was 4.5%, and to be honest, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, the uncertainty is crazy. We'll know a lot more at our next meeting how long the situation's going to go on.
I would kind of go for a lower number for the beginning for the next fiscal year, just given all the uncertainty and the fact that we just upped our starting point by 6%. I would actually lean more toward something more like 6% rather than 8.3. Just
I agree with
out
that.
there. Okay.
I agree with that, because but if we go much lower than that, then we're talking about we're ignoring the inflation, right?
Okay.
Because I think our fiscal year forecast for inflation is now over 5% for next fiscal year.
Wait,
And
right
that's
now,
one thing.
I thought it was like 7.5 or 7.9 this month. You think it's
No,
just
that's
going
the
to?
U.S., Maryland.
Okay, you're
That's
talking
the
about
That's
Hawaii.
the
Yeah.
US, and it's 1 month. And so.
Actually, the last month was 7.9. I think
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
February data that
7.9.
just came out. Yeah,
Mm.
and I'm talking
Yeah.
about the whole fiscal year, the average inflation rate over the entire fiscal year.
So you think it'll be?
Starting July 2022.
And as I think I said this already, but the interest rates, the treasury rates are not indicating that inflation is going to stay. The negative returns are huge. So you would think that implies that the market at least doesn't think inflation is going to be as high as it has been the last.
Yeah, they don't, right? I mean, the 5-year inflation forecasts are at best they're like 3% or something. I can't remember I haven't looked at them in a while. But then the other thing about that is that means that the Fed, even if it raises short-term rates 200 basis points this year, we still have easy monetary policy. I mean, real rates are still negative.
University of Michigan expectations data is starting to pick up consumer concerns, and that's starting to show. I think it was 5% the last one I saw.
Yeah, they're that's right. They're both their short run, their 1 year and their 5 year, but the consumer numbers are always several percentage points higher than the market and then professional forecasters. There's a new survey out of CEOs, and it's similarly high for US CEOs.
Councilmember Hutch, do you have any comments?
Can I ask a question?
Okay.
Yes,
Sorry.
so I guess
Yeah.
I'm thinking, it's based upon what Carl was saying, if inflation is, if the forecast is about 5%, I think 6 may be a little low, just from a standpoint of, it makes sense because then it's, what we were talking about, there's going to be additional growth, there's rebound in travel, whatever else, and some of the other drivers. So it just seems like it might be a little bit low. Now, that being said, it may be too high. But, to be conservative, Chrissy, I agree in the beginning of the year, 6 may be the right number based upon that. It may end up being higher, but I think, for purposes of being conservative, 6 might be the right number.
Councilmember Marilyn, before I go to Councilmember Lee, did you want to say say
Now,
something?
can I just ask a question again? Regarding the inflation, you know, I know what has come out for the CPI, but I was wondering the factors that make up inflation. It seems like, to me, there's a disconnect from what I see with prices and food prices, just going to the store and buying things. It seems like prices have gone up a lot more than what they're saying, unless those are not included in the computation of the CPI. And
Oh, they
so,
are.
right, so,
Yeah, they are. They're
It's just
included.
that, so Maryland, the last data point we have for food inflation for, this is urban Hawaii, which basically means Honolulu, was 8.4% growth for food.
yeah,
For food at home, we actually just got another data point for February, 9.5%.
Wow.
But the overall inflation is much lower than that. And the reason is that while food and gasoline are very salient, right? You have to eat every day and you fill your gas tank up often. The thing that matters the most, the biggest component, is housing. And so our housing costs haven't risen as much. So the shelter index, which includes rents and other inputs into housing, is up 3% year over year. And that represents, I don't remember the exact share, but it's going to be something close to between 35 and 40% of the total budget. And gas and fuels, so motor fuels makes up actually all energy makes up about 10% of the typical budget. Motor fuels makes up about 3% of the budget. So even though they're up 35, 40%, it doesn't end up driving up the overall CPI as much.
So Carl, with regard to the increase in prices, is it also being driven up by some of the supply chain issues?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the biggest increase in the January data was in used cars.
Yeah.
But we don't buy a lot of, I mean, you know, yeah, when you buy a used car, it's a lot, but we're not all buying a new car every month, and it's not a huge piece of our overall household budget. So yeah, there are obviously definitely supply chain issues there. And the problem has been that the supply chain disruptions just keep coming, right? It's just been one after another with Delta and then Omicron, and now a giant supply chain disruption with sanctions and, you know, rerouting of energy supplies.
I suppose the shipping and all those supply chain issues are going to be temporary, hopefully. That's
been the mantra.
For about a year.
That's the hope, right?
Yeah, everybody thinks that it's going to be a temporary thing, so.
Absolutely. Councilmember, do you have any comments? Wendell?
No, I really don't. I just kind of see, we got this inflation, 3%. You know, I think once it's built in, you're not going to see prices go back down. It's just going to, you know, go up or level off. And if the interest rate goes up, well, then I would suppose valuations will start to change again, which might not be a bad thing for younger buyers. But no, my guess is good as anybody else's guess right now at 23.
Say, Kurt, I think I'll make a motion at 6% for 2023.
Any second at 6%?
I second, Wendell second.
Okay. Any further discussion at 6% for fiscal year 2023? Okay, we'll take a vote. Vice Chairman Niwal?
Yes.
Dr. Siderhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Bonham?
Yes.
Vice Chair, not Vice Chair, sorry, Councilmember Mina?
Yes.
Councilmember Hayashi?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
The vote of 6% for fiscal year 2023 carries unanimously. Okay, next item on the agenda is the forecast for the remaining 5 years, remaining 5 years from fiscal 2024 through fiscal 2028. Dr. Kobe, what was our estimate at the January meeting?
We were
I
at
think it was
4%.
4.5.
4.5.
I show 4%.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it was 4.
Good. Then I don't have to move that we decrease our 4.5% forecast.
So is that what your model is showing, Carl? 4% after that?
It's very close to 4%. It's not, it's highly volatile, but
Yeah.
So we show 4% for the last 5 fiscal years. Any discussion?
I think it's as good a guess as anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything is so volatile right now. You don't know
What
where,
will be happening then?
huh?
What will be happening on the world stage then?
Yeah, you don't know the geopolitical
wanna-
factors.
Don't want to think about it.
We come back in the end of May for another general fund forecast. Does anyone want to make a motion to?
Oh, can I
Assuming
make
that-
one comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Assuming that we don't have a cyber attack or some kind of thing that cuts off our internet or anything, then I can say maybe 6% would be fine. You know, but if I don't know how the tax department is going to collect the money if we don't have any electricity or internet with these cyber
sorry, did
attacks.
you mean 4%?
No, 6%. Or excuse me, 4%. Yes.
Okay.
You said, I thought you said.
I thought you were talking about raising the forecast.
No, 4%, 4%.
Okay,
You know, if you look at the council means in the out years, it's not 4%. And honestly, the further out you go, I think the harder 4% is.
Yeah.
The wild card is really inflation. Are we going to be at 3% inflation or 2% inflation? Our forecasts are all returning to 2% inflation. And there's no reason to think Hawaii's economy is going to grow faster than 1% real. It hasn't grown faster than 1% real. And that's actually the compound annual growth rate from the peak before the Great Recession to the peak before the pandemic was 0.9% real GDP growth. So just to play devil's advocate,
Yeah,
I would be okay with
the 4.
one year at 4%, followed by a 3% or a 3.5% for the out years.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too.
so just in Carl, if I got you right, fiscal 24, 4%. The next 4 years at 3.5%.
Or 3%.
Can I
I mean,
ask one question for Carl? Does your model take into fact that we have a problem with getting enough employees? Because I look around here and everybody seems to have a job opening sign, bonuses and everything. And I'm not sure if this shortage of workers is going to affect our business going forward. It's pretty bad here. I mean, businesses are closing because they can't find employees. And so to what extent do you think that we'll have a continuing problem with employees, jobs, you know, this job openings all over the place?
You know, basically in our forecast out for the next decade, we don't have population recovering to its 2019 level, and we don't have the labor force recovering to its 2019 level. So, yeah.
So you
So
taking it into account, you're saying?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we're right, but we are not forecasting a recovery to levels of labor force and population and so on. And so that yes, that's in our models. And we're still talking about growth, that steady state growth of between 0.5% and 1% real.
Dr. Sidon?
You know,
I'm more comfortable with the 4, and one of the reasons is precisely because of what Marilyn said, which I think is the kind of a demographic shift in the labor force availability, and that there's going to be some inflation that's going to be induced through the labor market. It's right now we have things going on with the labor market, as well as the equity issues associated with the minimum wage. And so I think there's going to be a lot of wage pressure, and that's going to end up causing inflation to shift up a little bit. And so, that's one of the reasons why I was comfortable with the 4 number rather than reducing.
Councilmember Hayashi, do you have any comments?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of good points that are being made.
Yeah.
He says let's split the difference and do
Pick your
3.5.
poison.
But yeah, I mean, to me, it's like I said, there's great arguments on both sides, and that's why it's hovering between, I think, those two. Where to land, I'm not quite sure, honestly. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about
0.5%.
3-4 years down the road.
Right.
The differences here are, I mean, they're material, but we can't, they're within our uncertainty range for sure. I'm sympathetic to Jack's views, but I'm not convinced that the labor market, I guess I'm not quite as convinced that workers actually have real pricing power right now. I think they have temporary power because of the pandemic, but I'm not certain that's gonna stick around. Incidentally, the Bureau of Labor Statistics completely revised the labor force data dramatically. Like the day after we released our forecast report, they added about 40,000 people or 30,000 people back into the labor force in 2021, and then the unemployment rate was revised down for last year by like 1.5 percentage points. It's crazy.
Goodness.
Councilmember Lee, do you have any comments?
No, I'm good with the 4%. I think this last jobs report kind of blew me out of the water with 600,000. So, even with everything going on, we're going to keep churning ahead. So I'm probably a little higher, but 4%, I'm good with that.
I'm fine with 4%. I mean, I know I was playing devil's advocate and pointing out that you have to. I just want people to think about that to get to 4%. I think it really has to be an inflation story, and one way for that to happen is through the labor market. And 3% inflation is certainly not outside of the range of possibilities.
And just throwing it out there, as I think you had pointed out, Carl, our actual mean forecast in 2028 is 3%. Yeah.
Correct.
Going from 4.4 down to 3.
Yeah, I don't mind going down in out years, because I don't have this much faith.
Really?
Yeah, everybody's going to be retiring. The baby boomers are going to be retiring. You're going to have a worse shortage of workers.
Well, that would suggest going up. I mean, if that's going to have an impact on the labor market. But anyway,
more inflation, more wage growth.
Did we say 4% for 2025 and then 3.5 for the rest of the out years?
whatever the motion is.
I'll make that motion.
So we're voting on fiscal year 2024 to 2028.
So 2025, right?
No, 24.
2024 to 2028.
24.
Yeah,
So
sorry,
it's a
sorry.
5 years.
Yeah,
5
so
years.
that would be 4% and then 3.5 after that.
Right.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote. Vice Chair Niwa,
Yes,
Dr. Sidera,
Yes.
Dr. Bonham,
Yes.
Councilmember Maynard,
Yes,
Councilmember Hayashi,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes,
The vote carries unanimously. So the forecast by the council for fiscal year 2024 is 4%. And for the succeeding 4 fiscal years, fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2028, the forecast is 3.5% each year. Can I ask the members, when I write up the governor's report, does anyone have any comments about what they would like to say about inflation, the effect of inflation on our forecast of 21% for fiscal 2022?
I would just leave it vague and say that, you know, we've increased the forecast because the economy is doing strong, you know, doing better than we thought it would, as a result, largely as a result of tourism counts, but also including, you know, some inflationary component to that.
Yeah, I think we have to add in something about the inflation because it's gone up so much. We do have to address that and the interest rates.
Well, we're not exactly sure how much it's gone up.
But the inflation?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Hawaii inflation.
So I don't think we need to address interest rates. I don't think, I mean, I think the inflation, if you want to make a statement about inflation, it's one sentence that higher inflation leads to higher tax revenue growth in the short run. But that's not the overwhelming factor, right? The overwhelming factor is the massive amounts of income and the recovery of visitors, the recovery of the tourism industry. And, you know, honestly, the farther out we go, the more important the construction spending, the federal construction spending. That's something we didn't talk about. And then the thing I thought you were going to ask what we needed to say about the war. And you know what?
That's a good point.
I think that tax department probably has, and actually you've probably been responsible for writing these memos in the past when there were big events, whether it was, you know, a natural disaster or the Great Recession, or you know, basically that introduces uncertainty, and as those events unfurl, we'll be revisiting the forecast.
mhm.
You know, I mean, we certainly are not anticipating a recession. I wouldn't put that in the letter, but so I think I'm kind of being consistent with Jack and saying it's a little vague.
Okay. Anyone have any other suggestions or input?
I guess there's so many variables.
Okay.
As
Thank you.
always.
Next item on the agenda is a report by BNF for other revenues. Mr. Chan.
Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is Donovan Chun, and I'm with the Department of Budget and Finance. We have provided you our report of revised projections of general fund non-tax revenues, non-general fund tax and non-tax revenues since the January 6th meeting. The revenue estimates were prepared by departments in January and were based on point-in-time assumptions made by program and department staff. Our report includes a summary of significant changes. I will highlight a few items. Special tax revenues, table 3A. Transfers of general excise tax. The revisions were based off of the council's projections from the January meeting. And that's for the period fiscal years 22 through 28. On table 5A, other than special fund non-tax revenues, there is an adjustment in fiscal year 22, and that is under federal COVID-19 funds. And that's primarily due to revised guidance from the feds as far as drawdown of American Rescue Plan grants for emergency rental assistance. That was like $57 million adjustment. And the funds are still available to the state. The only difference is that the feds have issued guidance as far as how much you can draw down at one point and how much you have to encumber or obligate or spend prior to further drawdowns. So they revised their projection just to be a little bit more conservative, as they're gonna have to wait and see how fast those funds get actually obligated. Yeah. There's also a change for current services, and there was a net increase in fiscal year 22, and that reflects update of refunds, rebates from prescription drug plans back to the health fund for various medical and dental plans. That was about approximately 47.2 million. And those are the only items I wanted to point out.
Thanks,
Any
Jonathan.
Mr. Chun?
Thank
I
you.
move to accept the report.
I second
Second.
that.
Thank you, Mr. Chun. We'll take the vote. So Vice Chair Newell,
Yes,
Dr. Sidaros,
Yes.
Dr. Bonham,
Yes.
Councilmember Maynard,
Yes,
Councilmember Hayashi,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
So the council unanimously approves the report by Budget and Finance. Last item on the agenda is to schedule the next meeting for the general fund. Dr. Colby, is it July 1st is the reporting date? Not July 1st, I'm sorry.
June 1st.
June 1st. So normally we have it like roughly like the Thursday before the Memorial Day weekend. That would be,
26.
yeah, the 26th.
You guys are on your own.
Well, you won't be able to make it?
what? Where are
No,
you gonna
I'll-
be, Carl?
Memorial Day weekend, I'll be on the Oregon coast and camping.
Oh, you can Zoom, satellite
Oh,
phone.
yeah. I'll just talk to Elon Musk and get a Starlink.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is May 26th? I mean, there's no real advantage from meeting like a couple weeks earlier, right? You'll have all the information you'll need at the beginning
Oh, is this
of May.
TPI?
So
No, it's general fund.
you can
general
do May 26th. You can even
We can do
I
it.
will not be available from May 20, let's see, 24th on.
How about
So
the
if you
19th?
want to do May 23rd,
Can we do May 19 or May 23?
May
May
19th.
19 is a Thursday, May 23 is a Monday.
May 23 would be better for me.
Okay, it's good for me.
Are you sure, Carl? Are you gonna?
no,
Yeah,
I'm
Monday.
certain. I know what my schedule is.
Okay.
I'll be on a plane on the 24th,
Okay,
and let me just double check when let's see. Oh, I got to add another calendar in here. I don't know why my flight isn't on the calendar. Yeah, the 23rd, I can do it, but I will be on the, I'll be in Central Time, which shouldn't be a problem if you do a 2 o'clock meeting.
6 o'clock Central. No,
So
it's
how
7
is
o'clock.
Everyone else for Monday, May 23rd at 2 p.m. Hawaii
Yeah.
time.
I'm
Works
good.
for me.
Councilmember Lee, you okay with that?
Yes, sir. We're good.
And Christie, you're fine?
Just so you know, I'm going to be on my sabbatical, and I'll be Zooming in for the Council on Revenues meeting.
fabulous.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. That you should actually taking a vacation.
You don't want to let us lose by ourselves.
Has your sabbatical been approved by the legislature?
Did you say lose or loose?
Oh,
So the next general fund meeting will be Monday, May 23rd at 2 p.m.
Okay,
Sounds good.
Hopefully you guys will be meeting in person.
Yeah.
wouldn't that be nice?
That would be nice.
Yeah,
Do they have meetings in person?
Yeah.
Do they allow those, or
They're
is it
doing
all? supposed-
hybrid.
Beg your pardon?
They're doing hybrid meetings now.
Oh, you guys can come over to Maui and see the tourism here.
I don't know if we have a budget, to travel.
You'd have
to
to pick us up at the airport because
We can't afford the room rates on Maui.
On Maui, yeah.
Well,
We're gonna
they
have to
would
share,
Marriott.
right, all the guys. Okay, any other matter? Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We had unanimous
you.
votes on all the votes today. I wanted to-
Oh, we know we're going to be wrong then.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Kobe,
Oh,
Yvonne,
One has an-
all of your
yeah,
help.
big
And
opinion.
thank you, Mr. Chun.
Kurt,
Yes.
Thanks, Kurt. Bye.
I'm off. I have limited resources right now, so I'll send you the letter on Monday. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. When is it due?
In Tuesday.
Thanks, everybody.
So if you send it on Monday, I'll have, is it due on Monday?
It's due on Tuesday.
Okay, just make sure you, feel free to keep texting me if I don't respond.
Yeah. I'll send you a bunch of text, everything, and
Yeah.
you'll hear first
Yeah.
thing on Monday morning.
Just so
Thank you
know.
all, and
Yeah.
thanks for
I mean,
accommodating
my
limited-
practice, I have a lot of, time to time I have emergencies, quite a few emergencies. So, but just chase me
Fair
down. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for accommodating my limited technology today. So I appreciate it.
Okay. No,
I'll talk to you on
thank
Monday.
Thank you for all your
Okay.
help. Okay,
Bye-bye.
Hey, Marilyn.
Thanks, everyone.
Marilyn, can I Zoom you
You want to
back?
talk to me?
Yeah, but I
Uh-huh.
want to call you on a separate Zoom.
Okay,
I'll send you a Zoom link right now.
okay, great.
Okay, thanks.